I always like to start with what was your first role in entertainment?
Wow. I guess it depends on what you call entertainment.
Yeah.
Um, there was a period of time I worked in an entertainment lawyer's firm
Yeah.
as an assistant, so that I was rubbing against entertainment.
Yes. No, I think
But
that counts because you definitely learn stuff about the industry
yeah,
there.
but I think the first thing that I would call a job is when we got to write some pieces for an off-Broadway review.
Mm.
And we did a couple numbers for an off-Broadway review, then we did it for another one, and then our show started going, our off-Broadway show called Personals, and so it was all around the same time, all somewhere in the mid
Mm.
80s.
So how'd you get that first thing, the review when you were reviewing the off-Broadway show? Doing
Do you know, I I don't actually remember how we got that job. I want to say that it was our theatrical agent who got it for us when they were looking for writers, and we'd
Mm.
written a few things. I think I might be mistaken. I believe the first real job was we wrote children's theater
Mm.
musicals, did a musical version of Rapunzel, and they were really fun. And even though they were children's theater, it's stuff we were very proud of, and we're very happy to show it to
Yes.
people. And it did get us other jobs.
There we go. I love that. And so how did that start? Like now you're in that world, right? Now you've broken into theater. How did you start then creating your own work and putting it out there for people to see?
The whole time we were doing it, we were all simultaneously trying to create our own work.
Yeah.
Getting it out there is a whole different thing.
Yeah.
We were very lucky that Personals got an off Broadway run. I think it was about a year at the Minetta Lane Theater.
Nice.
Um, and then, we met with people. We got a job writing the musical version of the movie Arthur
Right.
from the producers who had the rights to it. But even that, you say you're working on something, but that was 7 years of our lives.
Right.
And it never made it to Broadway.
Okay, so you're in theater now, you're doing that, and that's pretty much the majority, but that's like your 20s, right? Is in New York City, right? And
Right.
making theater. And then you went to LA at like around 31, right? Is that
I
correct?
was 31 years old. We kind of did this thing where we said, this is our last year to try to get Arthur
Wow.
on Broadway. And if it doesn't happen, our agent to this day,
Wow.
who saw Personals, the show we did off Broadway, and she said, "Why aren't you doing television?" And we sort of went, "Yeah."
Mm.
Um, and then we decided that if after all these years, if Arthur doesn't go, then we're going to give television a shot.
Hmm.
And that's what we did. Arthur wasn't going to go one yet again.
Yeah.
And we started taking meetings in Los Angeles. I would bring my 3-month-old baby with me. David Crane was the assistant father. Um, and we would take meetings. And we very luckily got a job working for Norman Lear,
Yes.
developing television for him.
And how did
And
you get that? Was it just meeting after meeting and you guys kind of decided that was the right fit?
they offered us a job.
Yeah. You know,
The last year that we lived in New York, David and I, to make money, wrote for a game show called The Knowledge Bowl, I think it
wow.
was called.
Okay.
And that year, living in New York, we made $18,000.
Yeah.
And I had a baby.
Yeah.
We just couldn't do it anymore. We couldn't live in New York, and pay our rent and electricity and all of that stuff. So when this job came along, besides It's for Norman Lear.
I mean, yeah, huge.
It's for Norman Lear. They're going to pay for us to move,
Oh, nice.
and we can rent a house.
Yeah.
After living in 2 rooms, to be able to come out here and rent a
And have a
2-bedroom
whole house.
little house with a yard.
I'm in New York, so I get it. I'm like a
Yeah,
yard and more than 2 brooms and
yeah.
space? Have you wanted to come back to New York since, or you kind of just like,
You know, I miss theater. I
yeah,
miss New York
yeah.
theater. I miss dance.
Hmm.
But honestly, I don't need to cross the street with 40 other people. I
Especially
just
during a
don't need,
pandemic.
yeah, I just don't need to do that anymore.
That's fair.
So I don't miss living in the city. I miss
Mm.
being there and visiting, and my best friends are still there
Yeah.
and all of that. Yeah.
Great. So you're working for Norman Lear and are you starting to just like write a lot of scripts? Are you learning how to write
Well,
pilots? What are
at the
you doing?
same
Yeah.
time, when we got this job working for Norman, we also got a job writing a pilot
Mm.
um, called Dream On. And
Oh, so
that
is
was
that
one of the,
early?
it was, we knew that both things were very possibly going to be running on the same tracks.
Wow.
And ultimately, when we shot the pilot, um, I'm trying to think. I think we shot the pilot the summer before we started working for Norman,
Oh.
but then they picked it up. And now we have this job developing television for Norman Lear and a pilot that got picked up that's going to become a series. So we had to do this thing where we suspended and extended our contract so that we could go do Dream On.
Oh, interesting. Wow. Was that a hard decision or you kind of were just like, I have to go with the project that I created?
It was not a hard decision.
Yeah.
It was not. I mean, when we first came to LA and we were first meeting with people, we met with a bunch of agents, including Nancy, who, as I said, is since 1985 has been my TV agent.
Yeah.
Um,
Which is amazing.
and they were saying that what we had to do to break in was to work for other people on other people's shows.
Yes.
And we were so naive about television, we kind of went, "We don't want to do that.
Wow.
We don't want to work on other people's shows." I had a baby. If I was going to be working late nights, it wasn't going to be for someone else.
Wow.
So we decided to go our own route, and I'm knocking on wood and knocking on my head. It turned out okay.
Yeah. Do you think that route's still available for people now?
In some ways, I do. I mean, there's so much um, product.
Yeah.
And I think there are ways to get your own show done. Generally, now, if someone's going to do that, they would put a supervisor with them,
Right.
a show running type person. I mean, I think the fear is, has this person ever run a show before?
Right.
So the fact that we were even allowed to run our own show was a huge deal.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that so much of that happens right now.
Interesting. And I believe you had done a couple television products prior to Dream On, correct? Like that wasn't your first
It
time
was.
out it was it?
It was. I mean, we did a little bit of, here's a pilot idea. Sure, go write that.
Right.
Another
Got it.
pilot idea. Okay, well, and we thought the job was you write stuff and it doesn't get made.
Yeah.
That's exactly what the job was.
Yeah.
So we had done some of that after Dream On.
Got it.
We formed a company with David Crane, Kevin Bright, and myself. And we developed television for ourselves and developed a couple of things. We shot a couple of pilots one year. One show went, but didn't last very long. And then the next season, we shot a couple more pilots, and one of them was Friends.
Wow. Okay. So before we get to that, because that's huge, obviously. So prior to that, I also know you did like a couple things after Dream On that were happening, I think, simultaneously. So I think Dream On was from 90 to 93. There was also Family Album, right?
Right, that was one of those shows that we did while we were under that deal with Warner
Mm,
Brothers. That was
got it.
Family Album. It was short-lived. We did do one called Powers That Be, that was the one we did for Norman Lear.
Right. I was going to ask about that.
Yeah, we owed them a show, and
Mm,
um
interesting.
he had an idea, and it was a very tricky situation. That was a situation where they didn't want us to run our own show,
Hmm.
and they brought in a showrunner over us.
Hmm.
So it was that was very hard to give my baby to someone else to raise.
Yes.
And choices were made that I wouldn't have made. Um, yeah, it was not the way I would have wanted to do a show. And it was on for 2 seasons.
Yeah. So,
And it was
yeah.
crazy. It was such the way this show happened was we had when we suspended and extended our contract, we had a moment with Norman Lear, and Norman had read a script that we had written for him, and obviously he didn't love it, which is fine. That
Which it
happened.
happens. Yeah.
And he came up to me and he put his hands on my arms and he said, "It was shallow." And he put a hand on David's shoulder and said, "And superficial." So when we went to Dream On, we didn't put David Crane and Marta Kauffman on our door. We put shallow and superficial. Um, so when we were asked to write this other script for Norman, we were
Mm,
nervous that he didn't get us.
yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
and we were happy doing Dream On, and wanted to do our own stuff. And I can't believe I'm telling this story, but we decided, let's do a show that we can be proud of, but they probably won't make.
Mm,
We were told no politics. So
yeah.
the main character was a senator. Um,
Oh.
his wife was gay. She
Ooh.
slapped the maid. His daughter was bulimic. His son-in-law was suicidal. I mean, he was having an affair with his executive assistant. Um, it was everything we could think of that sounded really fun and satirical, but nobody will put this on. And they did.
And so what did all these experiences, so both like all like Dream On and, I'm trying to think Sunday Dinner, The Powers That Be, Family Album, all of that stuff, plus all the stuff that you wrote and it didn't happen, right? Because that's all part of it. How did that contribute to what you felt like was presenting Friends? Or like what did you learn from all that then, went into your experiences show running that show?
Everything. We were musical theater writers. Our first real TV show was Dream On,
Right.
and we learned as we were doing it. I mean, we had to ask people what writers' rooms look like and what do you do in one.
Yeah.
So the first thing we had to learn was how to run a writer's room. Um,
Hmm.
we wrote, so we understood structure,
Right.
and structures of a scene, and we got the basic idea of how many acts there are and all of that stuff. Um, but the other thing that happened when we were doing Dream On was a single. It was a star show. There was one lead actor, and he was in every single scene.
Which is a lot.
It was a lot. It was really hard on him, really a lot. So we decided our next one's going to be an ensemble,
Yeah.
and that's one of the ways we ended here at Friends.
Yeah. Oh, good to know. So, I mean, obviously, so I've heard stories that like really that the idea of Friends came from, a lot of it came from personal experience, like your friends and then the people you were close to. You saw this cafe called Insomnia Cafe in LA, but it took place in New York. So I was just curious in setting that up, why you chose New York City as a location, which ended up being like huge for the show. I mean, I've heard you call it like another character. But then in addition to that, it came from this spot in LA. You were in LA now. What sort of contributed to that?
Well, because it was about that time in your life when your friends or your family, and that time in our lives was when we lived in New York. We lived there. I lived there for about 11 years. I think David lived there for 10.
Mm,
Um, and we were part of a group of friends, and we did everything together.
yeah.
So our experience was related to New York.
Yeah.
Insomnia Cafe just gave us a really interesting set where you could have them meet on a regular basis and not wonder why they're there.
Yeah. That makes sense. And
Yeah.
so, in putting that together with David, what was that like? Putting that first script, putting all of them. I mean, I feel like from what I've heard with showrunners, you really have to put out so much content prior to when you're pitching. Was that the case with Friends that you had to put, maybe an idea for the whole season already ahead of it?
No, we didn't. I mean, we pitched the show, we pitched the characters, we pitched some episode ideas. I think it was pretty clear that the show was really about these six people. Um, I know that and the network ultimately got nervous that there wasn't anybody older in the cast.
Huh.
But thankfully we won that battle. Um, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah,
Fair. So
yeah.
let's break down. I've interviewed another showrunner before, but I wanted to ask
Oh wait,
you
I
your.
know what I was
Oh,
going to
yeah.
say. We didn't put all that much stuff forward. We didn't have to do a proof of concept. This was, I
Mm,
think, before
that
that
even
was a thing.
got it. So it's a different type of pitch than you probably would
Would do
just say,
today.
yeah, what to do today. Okay,
Yeah.
good to know. Um, okay, great. I already lost the other question that I was gonna. Oh, yeah, I've interviewed a showrunner before, but I wanted to take your I wanted to ask you what your idea of a showrunner is. What is the role? What are the responsibilities? Because it's very extensive and I don't think everyone really understands it.
Well, the most important job of a showrunner is to collaborate, to make people understand that their opinions are valuable, their ideas
Their
important.
opinions are valuable too.
Their opinions are very valuable. That their ideas are important. You know, you can run a show, but if it's not a happy place to be, nobody's going to want to come back.
Yes.
So I always feel that one very important job is to make everybody happy or to have everybody feel that they are glad to be doing this
Mm.
job. But then, but then you're in charge of all the stories. You're in charge of all the scripts. You don't write them all, but you help rewrite them. You look at costumes, you look at sets, you look at furniture, you look at shoes, you look at props. You worry about the actors. You have a relationship with the actors. You have a relationship with the director with whom you have to constantly communicate to make sure that he, she, or they are giving you what you imagined. Um, so showrunners do everything. We
Yeah.
do post production, we do editing, we do the mix playbacks, we do color correction. There isn't a piece of it that we aren't involved in. Um, but in each of those areas, there's someone who knows that better than we do. There's an editor who knows how to cut something better than I do. I know what I want something to feel like.
Right.
but she knows how to do it.
And you hire those people.
Yes, we
Yeah.
hire everybody.
And in terms of casting, because I'm, as an actress myself, and I know a lot of actors listen to this, you also decide pretty much all the casting choices, aside from the fact that the
Right.
network has to approve and you have to go through all that. Do you have a story in which maybe you wanted someone for a particular role and the network had to veto it, or you had to like fight for someone? Does that happen often that the network is kind of like, I really don't think we should have this him or her or them?
Um, well, the we when we were doing Friends, two of our cast members had other jobs, so we had to convince the networks to let them be in Friends, and then we'd figure it out if their other shows went or not.
Yeah.
Um, that was that was something I remember we really had to fight for,
Got it.
and we were willing to go to bat for Matthew Perry and Jennifer Aniston.
I mean,
Um,
yeah.
but generally, I mean, the network has opinions, and they give you your opinions, or the streaming service, or
Yeah.
wherever you have. Um, the the opinions that we would get a fair bit are on those first lists you get of people. Like, here's
Okay.
a list of all the people who can play Robert, and here's a list of all the people who could play Saul.
Hmm.
And the network will have an opinion on that list
Got it.
so that we can prioritize who are we going to first.
Yeah.
But generally, I have had the experience where um, people have, for the most part, been very respectful of our passion about our cast.
Good. Happy to hear that. And so are you sort of deciding all of the roles, everything from co-stars to series
Yep,
regulars, or
yep.
you kind of leave other people to do some of the smaller stuff?
No, I do all the small stuff. I do.
Yeah.
I
I think it's different for
love
everyone probably.
casting. It's
Good.
really important.
Yeah.
So I am in every single casting session that I am awake for.
Fair. Do you have any advice for actors who are auditioning and
Yes,
yes.
know that the people who are in the room really want you to succeed.
Mm,
Really want you to. We want a good person to play the part, and we really hope it's you when you walk in.
right.
So, yeah,
I
that's
love that.
it's not advice as much
It
as it's
is.
something you should know when you walk in.
Excellent. I love that. That's great. That's beautiful. Um, okay. So I had a couple other. Do you think a showrunner needs to have is more of a writer or more of a producer? And what I mean by that is obviously they're both. But do you think strengths have to fall on one over the other? Or do you feel like it's different for everybody and you have an idea that what's your favorite or what you're best at?
It all comes from the writing. Um, it comes first. Nothing will be good unless the writing is good. It's why with Grace and Frankie, we start well ahead of time so that we can get the scripts going, so that in particular, so that once production starts and I'm going to be spread a little more thin, we have stuff that we've been talking about, that we're planning on, and we know at least, we're all on the same page. I have been fortunate with Dream On, with Friends, and with Grace and Frankie of working with a partner.
Right. I was going to ask about that.
So, with David Crane and I, David never left the writer's room. That was his safe place. I loved going to the set and working with the actors and camera blocking day and rewriting on the spot and doing all of that. I loved it. Um, and the same is true for Grace and Frankie, where Howard Morris, who I co-wrote the pilot with, his happy place is the room, is the writer's room. He doesn't get
Hmm,
out much.
interesting.
And I like all of it. So
Yeah.
for me, what's fun about the job is being able to do everything.
Yeah.
Um, I also am because I do all of that, there is a lot of time wasted in a writer's room where people are just,
Yeah.
yeah.
Brainstorming, connecting, just talking about
Yeah.
fun a million things.
try to keep things on more on track when I'm there because my time is so limited.
Fair. Yeah, I love that. Um, okay. Ooh, that gave me a lot to think about. So, uh, yeah, okay. So, as a showrunner, then, specifically for Friends, and this is, I mean, we're going to talk about Friends. Obviously, we have to. I am very well aware that you've been asked all of the questions. There's so many you're probably getting all the time. So, let's try to go through them. One, when did you know that this was like what it was? When did you know it, whether it was like the first time you saw them sort of acting together? Was it the first time that it aired and you were like, this is special? When was the first time you were like, I know that this is going to be big?
Well, they're two different questions.
Yeah.
I knew we had something special the first time the six of them did a scene together, all six of them.
Yeah. I imagine that.
I got chills up my spine and just thought we had something really special there.
Yeah.
I didn't think that meant it would make it popular
Mm.
or a success. I just knew it was special. It really wasn't until after at the end of the first season, even though there was stuff happening all season and suddenly they're on magazines and but it was really between the end of the first season and the beginning of second season where it started to really land on me, where I'd be walking down the street with a friend's baseball cap and somebody would stop me
Mm.
and say, "Where did you get that?" Or you'd hear people talking in a restaurant. And it was strange and kind of a little embarrassing. It just felt so weird and surreal.
Yeah.
But that's really when it started to feel like something was happening. And I remember us watching the premiere of the second season, and that night you could just sort of feel the energy that this was a train that wasn't going to go off the tracks too easily.
That's nice. Yeah. It definitely didn't. Definitely wasn't that. So there's a quote that I found, if I can find it now on my like notes. Yes. Okay. So you talk, obviously, everyone asked you forever about a reunion. And I really love what you said. I don't remember when, I didn't check the date, but you said we will not be doing a reunion show. We will not be doing a reboot. There are two reasons for that. One of the reasons we don't do a reunion is because this is a show about a time in your life when you're friends or your family. And when you have a family, that changes. But the other reason, it's not going to beat what we did. So, what I would like to know is, obviously that changed, but it didn't change, right? So there obviously is something in the works. There's something people are working on, but it's not a reunion in the same way that people imagined it would be, right? It's not a
It's
reunion where
not.
people are going to play themselves, like
It,
they're going to play themselves,
it is not scripted.
right?
It is not scripted. Um, um, we were never going to do that. That was never going to happen, as you read. But this version of it, where it's more about the show, the impact the show had on them, on people around the world. It just celebrates the show, but I can't say too much about it,
Yeah, I figured,
except that it's coming soon.
which we're very excited about and we're very appreciative about. Um, Excellent, wonderful. But I did like that fact that never. I mean, obviously, we all love the show, but it exists, I think, in such a world that I'm kind of grateful that nothing was rebooted and that we
Right.
didn't have to. I agree with that, and I appreciated that, like sticking to that.
Thank.
And I'm glad that they're coming back in some way because we do love them. And I don't think we've seen all six of them together. I can't remember. I mean, even in the, what's
There
it
was
called?
one Instagram photo last year,
Yes,
and that's the last time the six of them were together, and I don't know how long.
which is crazy, but amazing. So this is going to be very exciting.
Yeah.
And I know you can't talk about it, but I just wanted to mention that. And wonderful. So we have Friends going on forever. That was your main, like, besides obviously your real child, your baby, right? And then it's ended. What's next? What were your thoughts? Did you want a break? Did you have other things in mind that you were like, if I had time, I would do X?
It was a really hard period for me. Um, I was I was turning 50 or had just turned 50, one of those. I was going through menopause. My oldest child was going to college, and my show just ended. And David Crane and I decided we wanted different things with our careers, and we decided not to write together anymore. Which, he's still one of my dearest friends in the world. Oh, you just upgraded.
I did. That's what I was a little distracted
Yeah.
for.
So all of those things happened in the same moment. And for a little while, I crawled into a nice dark hole, spent some time there. And when I crawled out, I realized I had to learn to write by myself. For 27 years, David Crane and I had written every word together. And now I had to, and he was always on the keyboard. So I wrote out loud. So now I'm going to be sitting here, me and my keyboard.
You're like, I have to touch.
And no one to talk to.
Right.
I literally type myself questions because that's stupid. I think it might be,
You did say your favorite part was collaborating.
Yeah.
So it makes sense.
Yeah, it was hard.
Also, you'd been doing something for so long one way.
Yeah.
So then how did you push through that?
Well, some of it was I knew that I wanted to stay away from multi-camera comedies.
Okay.
I just didn't want to compete with myself.
Yeah. Probably healthy.
Started looking into 1 hour comedic dramas and half-hour comedic dramas or dramatic comedies, whatever you want to call them, and started looking into other areas. And I was asked to supervise someone who'd never done a show before on a 1 hour, which was a great experience for me at that point in my life. It brought me into the 1 hour world. I got to learn about it, but it also helped me get out of feeling sad and, that
Was that joy?
Decade was over. What? No, it was related.
Related. That makes sense. Because that was one episode I think that you wrote on, right?
What?
No, for Related.
I supervised it.
Got it. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. So you did that. You worked there. Actually, you know what? Let's just backtrack for a second because something about what you said in sort of describing this hole that you went into, I feel like a lot of people, specifically in the pandemic, have their own holes that they are coming out of. Do you have anything to recommend to those people?
It's tough because this is a different kind of hole.
Yeah.
And many people were able to, especially writers, keep working, not necessarily get paid.
Yeah.
But they could keep working if they chose to or felt up to it. The thing about crawling out of a hole is you have to put your sights on something else and not on the crawling out itself.
Yeah.
But, when you're swimming up to the surface of the water, you have your eyes set on the sunlight on the other side of the water. So for me, it's the same thing. You crawl out of a hole, you've got to have a focus on something you can do and do actively that will distract you from the shitty feelings.
What was that for you?
Replace those feelings with happier and more joyful and more productive thoughts.
And was Related that for you, or were you climbing out before that?
It was a combination of two things. related was a lot of it. That really helped me get out of the hole, get out of my house. And then when I wrote my first script alone, I was
Mm.
terrified. But and there's nothing worse than facing a blank page. To this day, there's nothing I hate more than that. But when I finished the script, I had something I could feel okay about. And again, it was a doing.
Yes.
Even though I didn't know whether or not I could accomplish it, it was a doing.
Yeah.
And I just made myself finish and then rewrite it like 10 times.
Right. Did you show it to people at some
I
point?
did.
Yeah.
I did. I even showed it to David.
Yes. And what were the did they just give you like kind of
See,
notes back and forth? Was it
yeah, that's
all
what you do with your writer friends. She said, would you read this and give me some thoughts to make it better?
Yeah.
And people do.
Did that go anywhere? Or was it just kind of something for
No,
you?
it never went anywhere.
Which
It was a bummer.
happens, I think, so much. I mean,
So
the
much.
amount of things that I've heard writers, like for every success, there's like, not that, I wouldn't say the opposite's failure, but like there's a bunch of projects that never get
That
made.
are still in the trunk that have never seen
Exactly.
the light of day. I have one that I love so much. It's based on a true story. Um, Adolf Hitler had a nephew whose name was William Patrick Hitler. And Adolf Hitler found William Patrick to be, he basically thought he was the black sheep of the family, found him to be an opportunist, was kicked out of the Third Reich. He moves to the US with his mother, traveling around the country, making speeches on this is why I hate my Uncle Adolf. Joined the US Navy, was injured, got a Purple Heart. And then when the war was over and all the atrocities came out, he changed his name. Had 4 sons. When the sons were in their late teens and 20s, they made a pact never to marry and never have children so the bloodline could die with them.
Oh my God.
So I did a script called The Last of the Hitlers, based on that beginning, which I always said the log line is, do you think your family's fucked up? And it never went. And I bring it out every couple of years and try again, but it never went.
I mean, that story's so good.
Isn't it good?
Like, obviously, I don't know what the rest is like, but just that alone, I'm like, I had no idea.
There was a story, one of the brothers accidentally got a Jewish woman pregnant. And this was pre-Roe v. Wade.
Oh.
And he had to tell her who they were.
Oh my God.
Can you imagine being that woman?
I can't. I really can't. I don't know what that is a show. I am putting that out there that
Okay,
has to
thank
be
you.
made because that is, I want to know what happens. I'm
Yeah.
gonna have to do some research. Did any of them end up breaking the pact aside from that? I mean,
The youngest brother met a woman, fell in love, decided he wanted to get married, and then was killed in a car crash. Oh, it just gets more and more chilling the more
this
you dig in.
has to be made, Marta.
I
I have to see this. You know stories. I mean, I'm not surprised that you have this in your belt, but like,
But that's where it's interesting though, because discovering my love of the 1 hour format,
yeah.
where I didn't feel like I had to hold myself up against Friends.
Yeah.
And I could sort of reinvent myself, which is part of, what crawling out of that hole meant.
Yeah.
I didn't know I was doing that, but that's what I had to do. in order to move forward in my career and my life.
Yeah. It's like your own shoes were already big to fill almost. Like it's hard. I can't imagine. But you did it. I mean, you obviously did it. And so Grace and Frankie, let's start about that. I haven't I already kind of know, but I want you to sort of tell everyone the story of how that started, specifically how you got Jane and Lily to be
Okay,
in it.
so I was having lunch with Marcy Ross, who at the time was the head of television at Skydance Television. Um, and we had met before, and we really liked each other, and thought, "What we got to do something together." And she mentioned to me at that lunch that both Jane and Lily wanted to do TV. I thought she meant together. So I ran to my office, I called my agent, and I said, "I hear Jane and Lily want to do a TV show together. Is that true?" And 20 minutes later, she called me back and she said, "They do now." So,
It's such a good story. Also because there's such a good pairing and it makes so much sense. Like had
yeah.
I thought about it, before that happened, I would have been like, yes, that makes sense. So
And
did
they
you
love
then
each other so much.
yes. Them together, like I've seen interviews of I remember like I was watching something recently of them on Ellen and the love going back and forth. It's like
Yeah.
banter and love. It's
Yeah.
so palpable. So did you then go, well, what kind of story do I make for them? Like,
Well, yeah, we had to then come up with some ideas, and come up with more than once, hoping that something
right.
would stick. Um, and we came up with, I think it was 3 ideas. Um, and my daughter, who at the time was working for me doing development for my company,
Nice.
came up with the idea of 2 women who don't like each other, whose husbands fall in love and get married.
Super strong. I mean, that is in itself another like it just leads to intrigue.
Yeah, but the important thing about an idea like that is, it can't the show is obviously about something else. That's what starts the story. The show is really about, you can start your life over at any time.
Right.
And you don't want to, as a writer, get too caught up in the husband story is going to change after a while, once they sort of
Yeah.
grow into themselves as characters.
Right. That only sustains, I think, for the first few episodes. And then at some
Right.
point you're like, okay, well now what? Um, okay. So the first thing I want to ask is about Netflix, because you've been, so used to network shows. And this was really one of the first original series. How is having Netflix as a partner now?
Well, when we started, how many years ago was it? Well, this is our 7th season, but
I think 2015 is what I
okay,
wrote down.
50 years somewhere in there. Um, it was a very different experience. Look, I've always had good experiences with networks,
Yeah.
and for the most part, our notes have been fine, and very often extremely helpful.
Great.
Um, and it was always important to listen to the heart of the note, not necessarily the solution, but what's underneath the note.
Mm.
And you can develop a good working relationship with a network that way, and a studio. But Netflix was different. Um, we pitched the outline, they gave us some thoughts, we wrote the script, and we knew that based on this script, they would either pick it up and we would do 13 episodes, or they wouldn't do it. And Cindy Holland at the time, was who gave us actually most of our notes. I think Jane Wiseman was there then also doing for us. And the notes were notes that kept us true to our own vision.
Mm.
They didn't try to make it something else, or they never worried about the audience, or, the branding
Right.
of their network, the service. They never worried about that. They wanted this to be the best it could be.
Hmm.
Um, so
That's
they gave us this,
that's
and
amazing.
the big note was to lean into the drama,
Hmm. Hmm.
which was a great note.
That is a great note. And then how did it feel then to have to do multiple episodes and then drop them, right? All at once and have people like almost encourage people to binge as opposed which people do with friends obviously now, but all the time. But it still was probably a new concept, this idea of all these episodes dropping on a show as opposed to like, okay, we're doing this an hour. I mean, in some ways for you probably gives you way more time, right? To
Not
no?
really,
Okay.
not really. So the way it works, we had for 13 episodes, it was close to a year from beginning the writer's room through to when we drop them. It's close to a year to get everything done. And if in terms of doing the first season, which is where it felt the most different, because you don't do a pilot, you do a first episode.
Right.
When you do a pilot, you take a break. Sometimes there's recasting, sometimes there's rewriting. All kinds of things can happen after you shoot a pilot. And we weren't going to get to do any of those things.
Right.
So the learning curve is a little different.
Got it.
It took us, I think it took about 4 episodes until we found our way
Like
and found out how to walk the line between comedy and drama.
Hmm.
Um, but we were thrilled to be on Netflix. I think we were, yeah, it was a great working relationship. They had surprisingly strong opinions about music, which I thought was really funny.
Huh.
Um,
Yeah.
but they were amazing partners in this journey. They've been nothing but supportive. The show has done well by them. They've done well by us. I mean, we're very happy to be there, and that they've given us this gift of 7 seasons. We'll
Yeah.
be their longest running show.
Wow. I didn't know that. That's amazing.
Yeah.
And this year has been, I know we've talked about this before on a panel, but this year has been super crazy and everything has been pushed off. Where are we now with Grace and Frankie? I know there was a lot of Zoom meetings with the writer's room over the year. Where are we now?
So the writers come back to work on June 1st.
Yay.
The production starts on June 21st.
Excellent.
And we're going to shoot our last 11 and a half episodes.
Whew. How do you feel about it?
I can't wait to get back to work. I can't wait. I'm so excited to see people.
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to it. I think it will be challenging. We have a lot to learn about how to shoot in COVID days.
Yeah.
And we may have to do rewriting based on how we can shoot things. And so it's going to be a different kind of adventure. But I'm so looking forward to it.
I was going to ask about rewrites because you mentioned it also before with Friends, but how much improv do you like from your actors? Because obviously writing is key. It's the foundation of every great show. So you don't want to change it too much. Do you feel like, I mean, I've heard a lot of actors say like, do what you're supposed to do, say the lines. And if there's time, ask to like try something else and see, what do you feel?
But what we always did with Friends, which is we would always say, let us hear what we wrote first.
Yeah.
If it doesn't work, we'll be the first ones to say, oh, we got to fix that. And then pitch us whatever you want, but let us hear it our way once. And then pitch whatever you want. And then they could play and they had ideas and stuff. And, so it was a very collaborative experience. Jane and Lily like their words. They like their, so does Sam and Martin, actually. They like the words that they're given, and they are, consummate pros.
Yeah.
Who did not really, Jane did not come up through improv, so this was not something that for her would be, comfortable.
Right.
We do like to play when there's time, but it's really hard to find time when you're shooting a TV show.
Yeah.
You have 12-hour days, and we have 4 people in their 80s who we try to get them out as early as we can.
Yeah. Completely understand that. What are your tips for becoming a showrunner? And what are your tips for pitching as a showrunner? And just, what comes to mind?
Um, well, I'd say my tips for becoming a showrunner are that if you've worked on a number of different shows, find the qualities in each of the showrunners whom you've worked for and, build yourself from
Yeah.
that.
Collect them, collect
Yeah.
the traits you love.
Yeah. And be very aware of the traits you don't love.
Yeah.
Because the rules are set from the showrunner down. I mean, we have a thing, there is no yelling.
Yes.
Nobody yells at anybody for any reason. You got to talk to someone, you take them aside, you don't embarrass anybody. I mean, and if I were working for a showrunner who did that, I know I would be mortified. So I think a lot of it is taking from people that you admire. In terms of pitching,
Yeah.
I feel like pitching is performing. I write my pitches so they are incredibly conversational and feel like I'm telling a story. I don't want them to feel too written. I want people to just think I'm sharing this thing and there's this great character who has this stuff and the story goes, just so it feels more natural rather than stiff.
Yeah.
And you got to perform the hell out of it.
Excellent tip. Love it.
Thanks.
I can see you kind of doing that and being super animated about it. And I think that engages people more anyway. So it's a great tip. Who are some of your mentors?
Wow. Well, even though we had an unusual experience with Act 3, Norman Lear, obviously. And I have to be honest, Nancy Josephson, who is the agent who came to us in 1985 and said, "Why aren't you doing television?" She has mentored us from the beginning. And on top of that, she and I have kids that are all the same ages, and we've been through all kinds of life things together. But I would consider her to be a mentor. The truth is, there weren't a lot of women showrunners when I started.
Yeah.
So I didn't really have that female showrunner model.
Yeah. Do you think it was easier for you to become a showrunner because you were coming in with David? Because people weren't used to seeing female showrunners?
Absolutely.
It's crazy.
Yeah, and it was a female and a gay man. So we brought us the straight white guy. Kevin Bright.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So the other question I ask people at the end of the podcast is, what is your definition of success? And I like that specifically because I imagine it's evolved. So I like to kind of hear where you are with that definition.
Well, the first thing that came to my mind when you said it was pride. Even if I am so proud of the script I wrote for Last of the Hitlers, even though it never got made.
Yet.
It was a success for me at that time in my life when I was starting to write dramas. It meant everything to me.
Yeah.
So I think the first line of success is pride in your work. It's very hard to measure success, especially these days, by did it get picked up? How many episodes did it get? Is it, Netflix is only doing 3 seasons. Does that mean it wasn't as successful as something that was doing 7 seasons? So it's much harder to let those things define what success means. Um, the other thing I've got to say, and this falls in with pride, but there is nothing like people saying, I love your show.
Yeah.
Your show got me through something.
Yeah.
That's success.
Which you probably hear all the time because, I mean, Friends is, I mean, Grace and Frankie as well. Both of those are just shows that get at the heart of something that that you don't see a lot, you know?
Thank you. Thank you. I
So
appreciate that. We try.
I had to wait this long to compliment. I felt like, you know, it's been enough time. We're at a place now. I'm gonna throw in something so I'm not
Yeah, we know each other pretty well.
yeah, you know, I don't
We're
have to
2 drinks
fangirl in the
in.
beginning. We're two
Yeah.
drinks in. Great. The other random question I wanted to ask, this is small. I saw on IMDb that like you get credited for everything that I'll Be There for You for the Rembrandt. Like every time they're featured on something, you get credit for it. And I wanted to ask quickly, does that like how do you explain like how is that something because normally the theme song of a show I feel like doesn't get credited to the showrunner. Maybe
Well,
I'm wrong.
David and I wrote many of the lyrics.
Oh.
Yeah. Allie Willis did a version. We did a second draft.
Oh.
So we actually,
Then there you go. I just never saw that. I was looking
yeah,
through and I was like, how did that's crazy, but that makes sense.
yeah,
Go figure.
especially for the long one.
Right. Huh. Great. Good to know.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, I hate to do this because I've really, really enjoyed speaking to you so much. I'm so grateful for this. Thank you for
Um,
being on. I've just had the best time talking to you. There's so much there that I'm going to listen back and learn from myself, but I really
oh,
appreciate it.
thank you so much, Michelle. Great questions. I
Thank
really
you.
appreciated our time. Thank you.
I appreciate you.